free tools for this sort of thing. Google is the first, the line of first resort, or the line of first attacker for anybody trying to find anything. It's free. It's pretty good for the most part. But from a real professional user perspective, there are certainly ways that it falls short, and I'll give a very concrete example before I terminate my talk here. This photograph I wanted to bring up because it I think signifies or amplifies some of the opportunity in the markets that we're interested in, and it was taken back in March. This is in Cairo, and it's taken across the street from our office in Cairo, which is in a pretty smart neighborhood in Cairo. Nice, tall, 13-story. Some residential, some commercial buildings, all rather spiffy looking. And this was an empty lot across the street in which a new building was being built. And what fascinated about me, and I couldn't get away from the balcony when I was there watching this, was the method of construction. And what you see here is a tripod. There are three logs held together, and there's a pulley. And somewhere down there's a little crank, and you see three men down beneath the guy who looks like he's hanging. He's actually not hanging, but he's standing on top of a metal tube that has got a small platform on top of it, and it's for boring holes. And what he is doing is he is jumping up and down while the other three are turning the tube. And this is how they are digging the post. Now, my clients at Caterpillar love this photograph. They said, "Oh my God, I've got to get to Cairo." But it's just, and this is how they will build this. They will build this entire building essentially by hand. Probably the pyramids were built with higher technology, to be honest. But this obviously cannot last forever. And from a perspective of business opportunity, I think it shows a pretty clear direction. Lastly, I just have one slide here, and then an anecdote, and then I'll pass the floor on because you'll soon be tired of my voice. But I thought I would just list some of the top business issues and offsets and data issues and offsets that we tend to face in our markets. And one I think probably most important is media bias and professionalism and veracity. When we collect lots and lots of data, of course, we try to vet it as much as we can, but it's not our role to interpret these things. It is merely our role to give a clear and historical perspective and a quick perspective on what's available out there. But from an analysis point of view, this is a very tricky area for our business. I mentioned a little bit about the Middle East. There is no free and clear media in the Middle East. It's why the newspapers are so boring to read. But from a business information perspective, it poses quite a challenge. We try to remedy that with variety, but ultimately, unless we're writing it ourselves, we have a bit of an issue that there's always a bit of caveat emptor involved. Data timeliness. If I were to list one of the things that customers come back to more often than anything, it's the issue of timeliness. And as you become an electronic service, as I hinted again in my first slide, the expectations of timeliness are ever more pressing. The completeness of data is I guess I could write some inversely proportional completeness algorithm for countries that have slower growing GDPs, but it doesn't detract from the very fact that we are challenged in places that have much more lax reporting standards, and at the end of the day, an information provider is only as good as the information he's able to find, he or she's able to find. And that is, of course, related to poor reporting structures. Cost is one of these things for information providers. It's a terrible problem, because over time, the cost of information is perceived to be less. People don't particularly want to pay more for information. It's one of these industries that is required to deliver more and more, faster and faster every year, but is not allowed to increase prices. And in fact, if you surveyed a lot of information providers throughout the industry, you'll find prices have remained remarkably stable, whether it's a Bloomberg terminal or a Reuters 3000 terminal or an Economist subscription. And the only offset there is actually pressure on margins. And then I write tagging. This is a very internal one, but when you have reams and reams of data, you have as an information provider, you have a very serious mandate to try and stay on top of a very inexact science and expensive science. Lastly, I just wanted to close with one quick anecdote here. Since I did mention Google, I thought it would be instructive to bring out a very concrete example of the dangers of relying on the open web. And I take this from a piece of writing that came to me from VIP, which is published by Freeprint. And there's an interesting piece by a guy named Tim Buckley-Owen. And he was commenting on something that happened back in September. And it turns out that in September, the Chicago Tribune, for the historical background, in 2002 had published a story about the bankruptcy of United Airlines. And its affiliate publication, the Florida Sun-Sentinel, picked up the story as well. And both of these newspapers had a web page back in 2002 about the price of United Airlines stock around that bankruptcy. And somewhere along the line, some small pattern of usage emerged overnight, enough to bring this article up into the crawlers of Google, which then picked up the story and put it into their Google News algorithm. From that point, the story was picked up by a company called Income Securities Advisors, which provided notes of distressed companies to Bloomberg. Okay, so Bloomberg then picks up this story and publishes its own headline on the bankruptcy of United Airlines. And what happens? Well, the stock price tanks, like overnight, inexplicably. The stock price tanks. So the question is, those of you out here, if you had been told by 3 people that something was true, the world's biggest search engine, a specialized source of market information, and the world's most trusted, arguably, electronic business information service, would you believe it was true? If you'd been told 3 times, would you believe it was true? Just a question for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.